Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We've got a conversation that we're going to have with our audience today based on what we've seen so far with COVID-19 and how we've adapted and what we see as the new normal moving forward. My name is Bik Dutta. I'm the VP of Marketing and Product here at Carbon60, and joining me here are a couple of my colleagues. I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Peter.
Hey, Peter Kelly, Chief Information Security Officer.
Ian MacKinnon, Director of Operations, and I'm located in St. John, New Brunswick.
Great, thanks guys. So we're gonna have an interactive conversation today, really talking about our experiences and then go from there to hopefully provide some insight to our audience members here today. Just a brief about Carbon60 description. So we're a Canadian-based managed cloud service provider. We have customers in small, medium, and large across multiple industries. Really anyone that's looking for infrastructure managed services that have high criticality, and that's how we design and build our solutions and manage them as well. Couple of categories that we cater to with the managed cloud category. We offer our own cloud within data centers across Canada and also in the US and UK, private cloud environments within our data centers as well. And we also remain agnostic and can provide managed services on top of the hyperscalers like Amazon and Azure and manage those environments and solutions for our customers. We have a full suite of services that are ancillary to our core infrastructure capabilities around monitoring, patching, optimization, DR and backup solutions. And we can help with consulting services and migration to get you where you need to be from your current state to an optimal future state. We also have a robust security suite that Peter Kelly manages. And a few of the areas that we cover include endpoint protection and detection, vulnerability management, SIEM services, and of course, security consulting services as well. And lastly, we've built a bit of a niche over the many years that we've been around, over 20 years, around enterprise-grade managed WordPress hosting for large-scale websites for clients across Canada. So for today, we're going to go over a few key categories. Again, an internal view and what we've also seen from customers, and have our guys here, Peter and Ian, provide some insight on what they're seeing going forward. This is an interesting quote that we came across. It's been around for quite a while, but there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. And I think we can all agree that the last 60 days or so since COVID-19 hit, things have been moving very fast, fast evolving, and we kind of take for granted how things were before, and hope to get there soon as well. Why don't we kick it off with the team here, and more from an internal view. You know, when COVID first hit, Peter, really started off in March, when, at least from our company, when the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. Can you outline some of the key steps that we put in motion to address our company and our employees in the face of what was happening?
Sure. We have to kind of rewind a little bit. We actually started to look at the situation late February. We could see that we're going to potentially have a requirement to quarantine at some point in one or more of the offices if the situation continued to escalate. So the team, as a regular part of our process, reviews our BCP and our DR plans annually as part of our SOC 2 compliance. So it was raised during a senior level team meeting that our operations could be impacted, and we may have to look at the plans to see if there is any further consideration or changes that we may have to take into account. We do have epidemic type of plans within both plans, but most of our operational staff, actually but most of our operational staff already work remote, have the ability to work remote because we're a 24/7 business. So on March 9th, we started communications with our employees to let them know that we're watching the situation pretty closely, And at that time, we quietly activated our BCP plan. We started recording what was going on officially. We started with this with a priority to make sure that the remainder of the staff could work remotely, so that planning got a little bit deeper. We started thinking about what customers were going to need assistance, and we started reviewing all critical vendors to understand what their immediate plans were. We recommended to employees at that time that we suggested that they start working from home or consider working from home, and what they would need to do if there's any issues that employees would have. On March 11th, as everyone knows, the WHO declared the pandemic. We sent a follow-up email to employees to let them know that we're closely watching federal, provincial, municipal levels of government, see what they're saying and what the indication on the next steps we would need to do. We then recommended to staff strongly that we want people to consider working from home. On the 13th, we set up, so this is 2 days later, we set up a dedicated Confluence site that's like an internal intranet space where we actually started tracking the activities and the updates to the team. As part of the BCP plan, we started BCP calls in the morning to make sure we've got current status of employees, current status of customers, and critical vendors, and any updates that were coming in that would be relevant for the managers to start feeding down to other people within the organization. On the 13th, we also communicated with customers to let them know that we actually do have a plan. We've already activated it, and we're watching things, but there should be no change in operations. It should be seamless, essentially, is what the communication was. On the 16th, we escalated the plan to include the full shutdown of 2 of 3 of our offices because we had two cities now that had declared states of emergency. And at that point, a couple days later, the other office was requested to close down. The biggest thing was frequent communications to our employees to make sure they knew that we were watching things, we had a plan, and we were starting to execute that plan. My focus at that point kind of switched over to critical vendors and any security implications of the new norm that we're starting to see.
Cool, thanks, Peter. I guess just elaborating on the people side of the house, I mean, there's a definite human element to this. So Ian, how did we make it seamless for our team members to work remotely from across the country?
Well, as Peter mentioned, we started down the road of encouraging staff to work at home prior to having to work at home. And what I was experiencing with my operations team, the technical support type team, is they kept coming into the office, and I couldn't figure out why. And the reason was hardware. In early March, we were mandated that our team all go home and stay there and work from there. And shortly after they got there and realizing that hardware was an item that we had to address in a controlled fashion, we invited staff to come back to the office and visit their desks and take home what they needed to take home. Typically, it was big monitors, at the office, at the desk. From a support and operational type role, our team used big monitors, in some cases more than one monitor. So that was a big deal for our team. We realized that working at home for intermittent short periods of time, which our team has all done many times before, is a lot different than working there for weeks on end, an extended period of time. It's not the same at all. And the devices at the home, formerly used for intermittent type work for home access, they weren't sufficient for extended use, or other household members who, by the way, are at home as well. Some of the devices were in contention. Other household members, for example, had to use other devices. We also realized very quickly that internet services, not all internet services are created equal. Typically, again, there's other people in the household in this particular scenario, and they're competing for the same bandwidth. I can tell you that I have, in particular, my situation, I have 2 teenage boys at home with computers and nothing better to do. They're gamers and they're online all the time. The good news is they don't get up until noon, so that doesn't seem to bother. That's a good thing, I guess. We had to, for our team, largely their support is done via the phone, and we had to convert from traditional hardware phones to soft phones. So there was a bit of a transition there, and some things that we had to do from a technical perspective, but we quickly did that and created queues so that the support team had the ability to log in and support our customers. Our customers, you know, it was seamless to them. They didn't see that. That all went on behind the scenes, and we quickly transitioned it. Once our folks got at home and we started the cadence of, you know, communication and how he was going to interact, we started to settle in, and collaboration was crucial today. You know, prior to this, we were sort of using some of our collaboration tools, but overnight we were at 100% using everything that was collaborative in nature that we could. We today are on daily collaboration in instant message channels. We're on daily calls. What was really surprising to me is that, you know, I manage a tech team, and our tech team are doing video chats on a regular basis, and that's not normal for tech support type people, you know, and more so I find that's what's happening, and they're using those tools to the fullest extent. The video chats for me in managing groups or managing individuals is very important. I find that my team members are very particular about one-on-ones, video chatting, and it's very productive as well. It's very quick to understand and get a message across, and to manage and lead, and you know, and to manage change. Situation is really tough for sure, but our team has adapted and continues to operate at a high level serving our customers. So I'm quite proud of that.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Ian. So turning it, so we talked about our internal perspective and experiences. Obviously, we're a managed service provider, so our business is helping customers with their infrastructure, cloud security needs, and amongst other things. So early on, and to date, what are some of the key themes that we as a team saw with this new normal with our customers? Are there any particular stories that stand out for you? And let's start with Ian.
Thinking back to the beginning of March and into probably the third week of March, we have a very large customer manufacturer, and they reached out to us. You know, part of their business is they have a contact center, and when they reached out to us and they started to talk to us about their contact center agents, and knowing that the colder months of the year are considered prime time in their business process. One of the things, you know, we working on many things for them, even during this period of time. And one of the things they asked us to do is to basically do a pivot and to stop working on the things that we're working on for them, and to start working on a project whereby we would send all of their contact center agents home. I remember the call when I was curious about how many agents they wanted to send home, and I remember the answer being all of them. And you know, that was a big challenge. They have in addition to many agents, they have a contact center in Canada. They have contact centers in Canada. They have one in the U.S. as well. So they span the two countries. This particular client uses Genesys contact center software. Genesys is a company that has computer telephone integration software. So it wasn't as simple as sending somebody home to work remotely. There was a bit more integration work that we had to accomplish. And to make it a little more complicated, this particular customer's internal network was very, very complicated. Our approach was that we established a proof of concept within a week of the ask, and we worked through a few business process challenges. Hard phone sets converted to soft phones. Agent training was a big deal. Largely, it wasn't us that did that, but it was largely on the client side, and we had to work within that schedule. And we started off very slow. We wanted to make sure that we ironed out any of the kinks along the way, and so we had a few lessons learned along that same proof of concept. And once we got through that, we scaled very quickly, and we sent their entire contact center home. They're all using the platform today. It was basically, we did it in a controlled fashion. It was basically seamless to their business process. And again, this is prime time. The colder months is prime time for this particular client. And we were done early in April, and they were very happy with that.
Great. And Peter, any stories from some of the customers that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, sure. So on my side, we volunteered to meet with some of our customers in advance to ensure their teams were planning and were prepared for what we saw that was coming, and anything that they potentially would need from us and potentially impact our operations. So we're trying to plan in advance of how we're going to deploy some resources. We also wanted to provide some customers with suggestions based on what we were doing, what we were learning along the way. Most of our customers I was talking to, they normally work through corporate networks that have site-to-site VPNs into our environment for accessing their day-to-day applications. And what was needed overnight was client-to-site VPN applications to get client-site VPNs getting into the environment to access the applications a little bit differently. And VDI sessions, for example, we were required by Canada's largest travel company, for example, to beef up their capacity and the resources and troubleshoot VoIP type services and other applications that they use on a regular basis. Some of the stuff was out of scope, some of it was in scope. It didn't really matter. We wanted to make sure our customers were online, and we were trying to continue to provide that whole seamless transition. Also, at the same time, one of our larger federal customers needed to increase their network capacity over a weekend to deal with all their staff who normally work in the office, because their type of work is in a classified type state. So most of the work that has to be done it happens within that office, and all of a sudden all those users were working from home. So we work with Bell Canada, for example, over a weekend for network changes, firewall changes, VLAN changes, to do what would normally take months of scheduling and planning. It was done in days.
Good stuff. So turning the page a little bit towards another category. So everybody has, consumers, my parents, has heard about the whole security or the security issues that are prevalent or that are out in the wild as a result of COVID. And obviously this has hit news outlets everywhere, and that's why consumers are hearing about this, and it's creating a lot of news and information that's out there. And we heard about Zoom and the whole Zoom bombing. I guess they've grown considerably in terms of their usage, and then other security attacks in the wild. I guess, Peter, could you touch on those two categories around the security issues around Zoom, what our approach is on that, and then generally security threats that we've seen in the wild, and any kind of increases that we've seen in particular?
Sure. Yeah, Zoom. So we use Zoom, obviously. You can see it right now. We started hearing the various news reports about Zoom and the issues being reported. While much of the reports had some validity, much more was hype, potential misinformation being fueled by social media and how people communicate nowadays, and the speed at which they communicate, and news organizations reporting stuff basically not fully understand what the actual issues are and saying it's a complete Zoom issue and everyone that's using Zoom has been hacked. So as I said, we were already using Zoom. We went through the process of vetting it. We do third-party risk assessments for everything that we use. We initiated a proper reassessment of the risk of using Zoom in the context of which we're using it. And we essentially already have SSO. We already have MFA with Okta, for example, enabled for Zoom. All the check boxes that we would need to be able to use it were already in place. And a lot of the reports we tried to simulate, and we weren't able to because of the authenticated access that we use with Zoom. Because of this misinformation, I think a lot of it was probably because of the explosive growth that those guys had. Something like 10 million to 200 million users in like 4 days. So I think how they handled it and the speed at which they handled it was pretty good behind the scenes. How they handled it on the public side, that I'm not gonna comment on that. That's outside of my realm. But from our perspective, we continued the whole process of security awareness training to our employees of here's what you need to do. Here's some Zoom tips of what you need to do. But in the background, we already had a lot of the things locked up where we saw where there was going to be issues. The biggest thing is communicating to staff and communicating the security awareness.
Okay. And how about, we've heard a lot about, threats in the wild. In our experience, in your experience in particular with customers and part of your role as our CISO, what have you seen in terms of the threats and different kinds of threats that might be hitting us for the customers that we protect? Well,
we always see threats in the wild. We always see users being targeted. What we didn't see before was the explosion, the massive increase in user-based attacks and phishing attacks targeted around COVID-19. I think the figure, and I'm always wrong with figures, but it's roughly 400% increase in attacks happened over about 2 week span, and continue to this day. Like we still see them now. So what we try to remind our users is don't do things fast. Don't try to log into something fast. You got to verify what web page you're on, what email you're looking at, verify who it's from, verify where you're expecting an attachment. Slow down. Don't just be clicking on things to get work done as fast as you can. So we already do security awareness training, like I said, as part of our SOC 2. But now one thing that jumped out at us because of these user-based attacks, we have to change the way we're delivering this type of training and kind of pivot to something that's going to allow us to do it from what we were doing with in-person sessions to online and interactive type training sessions. The weakest link is always going to continue to be the user in this type of environment. And regardless of the level of security you have, the security systems, and all the protocols you have in place, all it takes is one user clicking something and you potentially have an issue. So a different approach is needed, in my opinion. And we're seeing that more and more applications are coming out online and over the cloud, and we're not deploying things the way we used to. So one thing we're also doing at the same time is implementing a zero trust approach, which allows staff to work remotely the way we're doing right now and work anywhere they need to, and not have the complex method of getting into the applications, the VPNs, and things like that. So what we're trying to do is simplify that, and while increasing the security monitoring at the same time.
Thanks for that, Peter. I guess switching gears a little bit now, we've talked about the internal view and the customer impact and how we've worked with customers and seen some of the challenges that they've faced. I think we can all agree that this is something you can plan for, but until you're actually in it, there's a lot of moving parts. Things change quickly, a lot of different stakeholders with respect to government, different levels of government, and we hope to never be in this situation again. But I guess, what would be some of the key lessons learned for Carbon60 at least so far, that potentially our audience here can benefit from. And why don't we start that with Ian?
Yeah, sure. You know, I continually find myself pulling from this experience and jotting down things into a document, things that I hadn't thought of. There's definitely some key lessons learned with regard to the logistics of moving people and business process, making a change and pivoting, that type of thing. You know, not all, I mentioned before, not all internet services are created equal. That was one of the challenges for us in working remotely. Our support teams need interaction. You know, electronic is fine, email is fine, phone is okay. You know, this video discussion, I was surprised how that was adopted. It was a real good thing for us. It continues to be, you know, it's a real unique opportunity to take all of the things away from this entire process, document all of them, and bake into you know, your continuity plan, your DR plan. There's a number of things that we need to follow up on. There's a number of things we did very well, and there's a number of things that we, you know, that quite frankly, we didn't think about. Working at home for short times, intermittent times, is a heck of a lot different than working from home for an extended period of time, and the logistics that go with that. So, you know, I think once we get away from this, once we emerge out of this, and hopefully soon, you know, there will be a debrief, and there'll be things that we jot down and write into our plan and bake into our plan, so that, you know, if we ever have to use it again, and God forbid, I hope we don't, but if we do, you know, it'll be there, and it'll be solid. So, you know, there's some of the things that we took away from this.
Cool. Peter, anything that you've taken away so far?
Well, it's the same old thing. Security isn't just a checkbox and you're done. You have to take a layered approach, and everything that we're doing tries to take that into account, because it's a continuous living issue, and our approach around that has to be holistic, and continue to check those layers and potentially change out certain technologies as you see changes in the wild. There's good technology out there to detect breaches, like we use CrowdStrike for endpoints, but that's only one piece of the larger plan. You got to continue to patch. We used to have people that would patch machines on Patch Tuesday with Microsoft, but we use Qualys for vulnerability scans, for example, and we get alerts from those guys on a daily basis, and it's pages and pages and pages of new vulnerabilities that are coming out every day for applications. So we're adapting because of that. The other thing we're also seeing is boards are now needing that visibility, and they need to be part of the overall security program and process, because they've got responsibility of it now, responsibility for breaches because of the government changes that are coming out in the compliance requirements and regulations. So biggest thing for us to get out there to people is you got to plan for security in your budget. It's not buy a piece of software and you're done. It's a living thing that has to be taken seriously. The benefits are going to outweigh the consequences if you were breached.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, you know, we've had certainly a lot of conversations during this time frame with our customer management teams, with our customers and other potential customers around, you know, DR, really looking harder at their DR scenarios and strategies. You know, for some customers, when we originally onboarded them and work with them, potentially in some cases, you know, DR wasn't something that they were as interested in. And, you know, these kind of events, you know, despite regardless of whether there was an interruption or not, for the most part, there weren't any from our perspective. But it does make people dust off that, you know, business continuity and DR plan to make sure that if something worse were to happen, pandemic or otherwise, would they be prepared, and how could they recover? And that's a broader conversation that takes a bit of you know, a planning and a different viewpoint. I think this this event has kind of showed the market, show the world and clients that you do have to take some of this stuff seriously and factor it into your budget in addition to the security elements. I think the last element here in terms of lessons learned, and I'm speaking here on behalf of the company and our HR team, is around remote work, and we're evolving that in our company as well, but looking at speaking with friends and seeing other companies and how they've across different verticals and how they've approached it. It clearly is something that's here to stay, and the technology that already existed. We've been using Zoom for a little while now. We've had other kind of conferencing type technologies for remote work enablement. My first job when I got into the technology industry over 15 years ago, as a product manager, one of the products I had was live meeting and WebEx, and trying to market that to the business community. And it's really now that it's starting to pick up in a business setting and broader. So I think that's definitely a new way of looking at things, and obviously that has impact on real estate and how you plan your offices and so on. But the human element is, Ian, you kind of mentioned it in one of your segments on video and keeping in touch. And one of the things that we've encouraged, not obviously never mandatory, but encourage our teams in our individual one-on-ones or group meetings or all company meetings, is to turn that video on. So it adds to that human connection. When we were in the office, and some of our team members have always been remote, but for those that would come into the office every now and then or on a full-time basis, we're missing that. So it provides a nice venue to get body language and emotional cues other than just what you hear on voice or in an email. So that's become pretty important. And I think it's for us internally at all levels of the organization. It seems like it's here to stay. We've used Zoom for virtual cocktail hours and trivia sessions every other week, just to keep it social. We've got a quarantine Slack channel just for fun, like a water cooler basically, to keep everyone engaged. We've adopted collaboration tools like Office 365 as well, to make life easier, more productive for all of our employees to do what they need to do to work with each other and to help customers as well. So I guess the next step is, and we see different provinces in Canada and different states in the US and other regions starting to open up. So at this point, what's your take, Peter, on how do we return and what the new normal is shaping up to be?
Well, I'd like to say it's a shape for BCP plan and go backwards, but that's not possible. We are planning the next steps to get folks back to work, and that involves all sorts of people. That involves the office buildings, those staff, the people that clean the offices, things like that. The good thing is we don't have any specific timeline or any specific mandate to get people back into the offices. We're running just fine now, and I think we can continue to do so for the next little while. As you hear the term, the working remote's the new norm, but we need to keep one big thing in mind, that the most important thing to us is that our staff and their health and safety, and so we don't want to rush it. There's no vaccine yet for this thing. They're working through it. They're trying to open up the economy where you can safely. The flu season's still coming in the fall, and there's potentially a second wave. So we're not rushing it. We're doing exactly what we did at the beginning of the BCP plan, is monitoring what the governments are doing, what the municipalities are doing, where the states of emergency are starting to be lifted, and how people are doing it. So we're watching and we're learning as we go.
Cool. And just to close it out, in case there's any, well, we'll wait for some questions or see if there's any questions. I was reading an article the other day, just really an advisory statement from Deloitte Consulting on how technology leaders will be defined. And that's they've kind of outlined three different dimensions, one being how they react to managing a crisis, around response, recovery, and thrive. And some of the key steps around that they've outlined are really how to evaluate the supply chain and the value chain on how in the future disruptions could be mitigated, thinking about the future of scenarios in terms of driving new technology adoption and innovation within companies. And then lastly, as we talked about a few times, the really digitally enabling employees, companies with the future of work types of tools. And we've only touched on a few today in terms of how we've interacted and how our customers, some of our key customers are using different tools, but there's a whole ton of others out there to improve productivity, improve productivity and maintain productivity for a broad audience. So with that, I'll leave it. I want to thank both you, Ian and Peter, for joining, and for audience for really listening in on some of the things that we've taken away from this pandemic, and hope to speak to you soon on what some other services and capabilities that we have that not only address this from a security perspective and VR, but other elements as part of a broader series that we're endeavoring to provide our audience. Thanks, guys.